Keith and Jeremy aren't here this morning, which part of me is glad about. Jeremy always hates on me for wearing shorts when I'm preaching, but today they're not style, they're functional. The start of the week, I went on a Year 9 camp to Borland Lodge and got eaten alive by sandflies. My legs are so itchy right now. It was a really good camp though. One of our boys caught an eel down by the lake. We cooked it up, had a feed. It was really cool, but today my shorts are functional. That's what I've been up to. Sorry. Alongside doing my job at school with 24/7, I have another job with an insulation company. We get up in roofs, we get under floors, staple up insulation. We drive around in these big vans. A new one has just been painted bright orange. It's very easy to spot. And about a month ago, we were out in Bluff doing a job, and the guy that usually drives the van went home because he was sick. The other guy that I was working with doesn't have a license that he can use, so it's up to me to drive this van home from Bluff. I did not do any of my driving training in a manual car. I have driven a manual twice up to this point. Both times are in my mate's ute. One time I thought I was doing really well, driving back from Adatara. Turns out I had the handbrake on the whole time. Got home and it smelled really bad. So I'm very underqualified to drive this van. I've never driven anything that size. It's not big enough to need a Class 2 license or anything, but it's still pretty big. But there's no one else to drive it home. So I get to the main road of Bluff, and I stall, which we have a bit of a laugh about, which is fine. Then I get on the main road, and then after that, it's pretty much smooth sailing all the way around. Just get up to 5th and kind of just cruise along at 90. We can't go 100. It's a van. It wasn't until I got into town to a roundabout at wherever that over bit is for Tay Street. And I start to go, and the problem with this van is the clutch. It basically has a spring in it. As soon as you start lifting your foot off, it just goes bang. But the sweet spot to start going is right as it starts to spring out. And as I'm starting to go through this roundabout, I stall. Now, I'm not fully through the roundabout. I'd only just started going, but coming from my right is this big truck, and behind me is this little wee car. And in a panic, I kind of put my foot on the clutch and forget that I need to put on the brake as well. So I kind of start rolling back a wee bit, so I slam my foot on the brake. Things just got very real very fast. It kind of dawns on me that I'm super underqualified to drive this van. If I stuff up, people could get hurt. It's not just me in this van, it's someone else. We're in a big car. There's a small car behind us. We'd probably just push it out of the way. But people could get hurt because I don't really know what I'm doing. Now, I was talking on part of a series. We're looking at heroines of the Old Testament. And today I'm talking about Esther. Now, Esther is quite a popular story, big one growing up as a kid. We had a VeggieTales movie about it. I watched that probably about 100 times. It's a very good story. So I'm not going to unpack the whole thing because that'll take too long. But I will briefly go through it and unpack this incredible person that Esther is. So the story opens in chapter 1, and we have this king that throws a massive party. We're told that he basically tells everyone that they can get drunk as they want. The party goes for about a week, and on the final day, the king sends a demand to his wife to come out and parade around for everyone. His wife quite rightly refuses. The king basically throws a massive tantrum and asks the people around him, his advisors, how he can get his wife kicked out of her queenship. So this is a bit of an insight into who our king is. The first one, the king's a bit of a drunkard. He likes to party, he likes other people to party, and he likes to party pretty hard. Secondly, we know that he angers quite easily. His ego can't handle that his wife told him no, and so he has a massive tantrum and quite an overreaction, gets her kicked out of the castle. We also know that he's a bit of a pushover. He doesn't actually know what's going on in his kingdom. He asks the people around him what he can do to get his wife removed from the queenship. And the guy next to him says, hey, this isn't good. Pretty soon everyone in our country is going to be starting to be pushed around by their wives because your wife told you no. So he makes the king pretty much make a decree saying that the man is the head of the household. And the king just goes, oh yeah, whatever. Sure, let's do it. So he's a pushover. He also has a very hands-off leadership style. He doesn't actually go out and see the queen. He doesn't talk to her at all. He just talks to the other people around him and tells them to sort it out. This is the kind of king that Esther has. A wee bit later, chapter 2, the king wants a new queen. He misses his queen, and so the best way to find your partner in ruling is to hold a beauty contest. So that's what he does, because everyone knows that if you're pretty, you're really good at ruling a kingdom. So this is where we meet Esther. Now, Esther is looked after by her cousin Mordecai. Both her parents have died, and we can assume she doesn't have any older siblings that can look after her. We can assume that Esther's quite young because she isn't married yet. We can understand that she's quite beautiful because otherwise the king probably wouldn't be interested in her. When Esther is selected to be the new queen, her cousin tells her to hide her Jewish heritage, to hide who she is and who her people are. A short while later, after Esther is queen, we meet Mordecai, her cousin. Mordecai, we know, kind of works in the palace because he has access in and around kind of the courtyard. And while he's doing his job, he uncovers two people planning to assassinate the king. So he goes straight to the queen, Esther, and says, hey, these guys are planning this, you need to go tell the king. Esther goes and tells the king and gives Mordecai the credit. The king doesn't know this because he's busy, I guess, but whoever writes down kind of the official records makes a note that this was Mordecai that uncovered the assassination. Next chapter, we meet Haman. Haman is our villain of the story. I quite like that picture. He probably didn't look anything like that. All we know about Haman is that he is being promoted to the top dog under the king. He's also an enemy of the Jewish people. He's an Agagite, which historically the Jews kind of wiped out as people, and he really hates the Jewish community. As Haman goes around his job, part of his perks are that people need to respect him, they need to cower before him, they need to praise him as he walks by. Mordecai doesn't do this ever, and Haman cannot handle it. And when he finds out that Mordecai is Jewish, he plans not to kill just Mordecai, but the whole Jewish community living in the city. Rightly so, when Mordecai hears this, he goes into mourning. He's deeply grieved. Sorry, let me backtrack a wee bit. The way that Haman manages to kill all the Jews is he goes to the king and he convinces the king that there's some people out to get him and that he should make a law that says everyone should be able to kill these people. The king doesn't realise that Haman is talking about a whole community in his city, gives it his royal seal, and makes it a law. At the time, anything the king puts his seal on cannot be undone, even by the king himself. So you'd think when you're making this law that you would double check that it's not going to hurt everyone. He doesn't do that. He just says, yep, sounds good, sticks his signet on it, and then makes it a law. So obviously Mordecai is quite distraught when he hears this. His whole people are in danger and there doesn't seem to be any way out. But Mordecai goes to Esther and he asks her to go to talk to the king and to convince the king to change his mind. At the time, one of the rules about the king is that you can't enter kind of the inner courtyard unless you have a pre-arranged appointment. If you don't, you get killed, unless the king sticks out his scepter to allow you to live. Now we know that this king is not a very good king. He's a bit of a drunkard, he's a bit of a pushover, he does what other people around him say, and he can't handle women telling him no. Esther faces the possibility of death. If she goes and approaches the king and the king is not happy with her, the king can have her die and go and find another queen. We know that the king hasn't been interested in Esther for about a month at this point. He doesn't want to see her. If he wanted to see her, he would call for her. It's kind of like approaching your CEO at a company about his new workplace policy when you know that they don't want to see you. And if they're not happy to see you, you die. So rightly so, Esther is very hesitant. She doesn't want to die. And for her, she's kind of just reached her roundabout and she's stalled and things have just gotten really real, really fast. She tells Mordecai that she's not sure. And Mordecai gives an amazing response. He says in verse 14, "For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish." This is basically telling Esther, like, hey, either way, you're not getting out of this. You're a Jewish person, your family is Jewish, they'll find out and they'll be able to kill you as well. Then says, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." There's a great line. He tells Esther that, hey, maybe this isn't just us in this. Maybe this is God's work. Maybe this is why you have been chosen as queen. So Esther responds, "Go gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." Esther has incredible courage. She realizes that, God might have placed her here for this, but she's also aware that he might not have, and that things may not work out well. But she decides, I'll do it. If I perish, I perish. She's willing to give her life in an attempt to save her people. In chapter 5, Esther approaches the king and he's happy to see her. He lets her approach, he lets her live, and asks, what do you want? Esther says, "Hey, I'd like for you and Haman to come to this banquet that I've made for you." The king goes, "Yep, sure." Leaves his king duties, grabs Haman, goes to this party. We know that he likes a good party. And at the party, he asks Esther, "What do you want? Why did you come and see me?" And Esther, still quite nervous, asks the king to come to another banquet that she will prepare tomorrow. We know the king likes the party, so he says yes. After the party, Mordecai is heading home, and on his way out of the gate, he sees Mordecai. Mordecai doesn't acknowledge Haman, and this really makes Haman mad. So Haman goes home, and he talks to his wife, and he plots to kill Mordecai the very next day. He's like, "I can't wait. I need this guy to die tomorrow." That night, the king can't sleep. So his way of getting to sleep is listening to the scrolls. Basically, that's the news and the events of his kingdom. Probably not the kind of thing that you want your king to be able to fall asleep to. As he's listening, he realizes that actually it was Mordecai that tipped off the king about the assassination attempt. So the king goes, "Did I reward him?" "Nope, totally forgot about it." So he calls Haman, and he goes, "What should I do to honor someone that I really like?" Haman is quite up himself. He thinks the king is talking about him, so he gives the king all these massive ideas for a parade, for a horse, for one of the king's own cloaks. And the king goes, "Oh, this sounds really good. Do that for Mordecai." And this, I can imagine Haman would be quite outraged. But now something has happened. Haman can't really kill the king's favourite guy at the moment the next day. So he's going to have to hold off on that. Next, we return to Esther, the king and Haman at the second banquet the next day. Where Esther, the king asks Esther what she wants, and she says, "I want you to save my people. Someone's out to get them. Please save them." And the king goes, "Who?" Like, he hasn't remembered that he's just made a law that lets a whole bunch of people die. He's a bit stupid. So Esther dobs Haman in, and the king is outraged. So he leaves. He goes to the garden and he leaves Esther with the person who has just lost everything. Haman knows that the king is going to kill him for what he's done, and the king has just left Esther alone with Haman. At this point, you kind of expect Haman to go like all or nothing, at least try and kill one Jew before he goes. But he doesn't kill Esther. But I can imagine Esther's probably quite terrified in this situation. We know that she's young. She's with a man. She's alone, and she's just basically ruined this guy's life. But she still hangs around. The king returns and sees Haman pleading with Esther, and then orders Haman to be executed. In the next chapters, no more Haman. In the next chapters, we see Esther and Mordecai go about creating a way to kind of circumvent the law that the king has made that he can't change. This law allows the Jewish people to defend themselves on the day that people are allowed to wipe them out. We know that in the city of Susa, about 500 people were killed that were trying to destroy the Jewish community. That's just in this one city. There's probably far more people dying that were trying to kill the Jews around. And then Esther approaches the king and says, "Please let us destroy the people trying to destroy us tomorrow." So the next day, the Jews go out and they're able to wipe out their enemies and the people that would want to do them harm. We know that Esther is given the property that Haman was going to be given, and Mordecai is promoted to Haman's job. He's now the new top dog. It's a good story, eh? Pretty lucky, I'll say. There's a lot of luck in it. Lucky that Esther was chosen as the queen, so that she was then in a position to save her people. Lucky that the king couldn't sleep and that he listened to the scrolls and that he realised that actually Mordecai was the guy that saved them. So he makes a parade, so then Mordecai can't get killed by Haman the next day. Lucky that the two people in a position to save the Jews are actually clever enough to come up with laws to kind of get around a law that can't be undone. We know it's not really luck though, right? This is God working behind the scenes. And what I really like about Esther is that often in the Old Testament, we have these big heroes that we see. We see David and Moses and Abraham. These extremely godly men that lead nations and hear God speak and even catch a glimpse of God. The reason I really like Esther is she's probably the most relatable hero ever. Throughout the whole story, Esther is herself. She doesn't have any special talent. We know that she's smart, but other than that, doesn't seem like she's got anything huge going on for her. She's not deeply spiritual. Throughout the whole story of Esther, fun fact, God isn't ever mentioned. Esther doesn't pray to God. In fact, she's actively trying to hide her faith. She's trying to hide who she is. She's trying to seem as ungodly as possible. Sorry. Yet, God positions her uniquely to save her people. Because God knows the bigger picture. God knows what is going to happen long before we do. He knows what's going to happen to his people. So before we even get close to that, God is already making a plan to save his people. In the story, Mordecai nails it. He says, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" And he says an awesome response. "If I perish, I perish." Esther is willing to acknowledge that, yep, maybe God's put me in this position. And if I die, I die. Obviously, none of us are inducted into royalty. So I'd just like to change the quote a wee bit. Can I go to the next couple slides? Next one. I'd just like to take those two bits out. "And who knows but that you've come to blank for such a time as blank." If you had told 10-year-old me 13 years ago that the day that Mum took me to this church, and you said, who knows, but that you've come to ICBC for such a time as to basically create all the positive events in your life, I would have told Mum about the weird guy in the car on the way home that told me this cryptic verse. But the reality is, in coming here, so much awesome stuff has happened. Because of that, I met someone who got me to lead at a camp, and I realised that I love working with young people. Because of this, I joined a boys' discipleship group, and on the way there, I met my soon-to-be wife. It's pretty cool, eh? I discovered drumming in this church. I discovered my friends in this church. If you had told Nathan Nelson, who ran that discipleship group, that, hey, because you run this, one of the boys is going to meet the love of his life. He's a wee bit more spiritual than me. He probably would have been like, oh, that's cool. But I don't think it would have seemed weird. But looking back now from this one event, that in reality, if I didn't want to be here, I still would have been here. Mum would have taken me kicking or screaming to church. That was never an option. Whether I wanted to be here or not, that's where I was. And looking back, that has got God's placement written all over it. A dream of mine as a youth worker is to be mentioned in someone else's conversation that I'll never hear, about how ages ago they had this really cool leader who had dope socks, who had this really cool, who made a really big impact on their life, and that's why they got to where they were today. It's not a conversation I'm ever going to know, but that doesn't mean that God won't, or maybe already hasn't, placed me in that person's life for a time to change them. I'm not saying it's going to be a big change. It could have just happened from a conversation. But sometimes when we see those big heroes in the Bible, we think, oh man, I've got to be really godly like them, or I've got to be able to know what God wants like them. But I think we need to be more like Esther. I think we need to be ourselves. I think we just need to be willing to be placed somewhere that God needs us. And maybe that doesn't have to be something huge either. It'd be cool if one of us could save an entire nation of people just by being somewhere. But in reality, it may just be, who knows, that you've come to church this morning for such a time as having a coffee with someone and having a yarn that gets them through the week. Maybe you've come to work for such a time as just being a positive influence in that space. So as we leave here and as we think about Esther, I've just got two questions for everyone. Where is it that God has placed you? Where is it that you find yourself with the people around you? And why could you be placed there? Why do you think you are where you are now? Because God has placed us all somewhere. We may not know it, we may not see it, it may happen a long time in the future, but God has placed you somewhere. Think about why. I'd like to pray, and as I pray, invite the worship team up. God, thank you for the simplicity of Esther. Thank you that she is herself. Thank you that she was able to be used by you to do incredible things, God. Let's pray that as we leave, as we go into our jobs, school, study, whatever, that you will have us placed there for something that we may never see. Pray that we're able to impact people's lives, Lord. I pray that we can see that impact, but also pray that we can trust in you, that you know what's coming in the future. You know what's down the line, Lord, and you're already making plans to make that happen. I just pray that this week everyone is able to have a glimpse into where you've placed them, Lord, and maybe why.